Hey guys, this is Billy from adultcello.com, and today I want to give you my advice on what to do when you're about to play in an ensemble for the first time. So for most of us, that's going to be a community orchestra. It's really exciting. You finally get to play with other people, but it can be a little nerve-wracking because, there's kind of like these unspoken rules, and so I just have a bunch of kind of guidelines and rules you can follow so that you just blend seamlessly and don't have anything embarrassing like what happened to me when I showed up for my first dress rehearsal of all time in a tuxedo, because I thought dress rehearsal meant dress up, like dress and rehearse. And it was the day before the concert, so I was just in a tuxedo on a Saturday for no reason. So please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Let's start with the first category. So the first thing is, and we're talking specifically about orchestral settings, what should you bring? So let me run through a couple items I would definitely bring no matter what. First off is a rock stop for the cello's end pin. And I would recommend the kind of rock stop like this, okay, that connects to the chair. They have those ones that are kind of like a little donut, and you put those in. The thing is, where you're rehearsing, you don't know how clean the floor is, and I've seen so many people, they bring their nice donut-shaped, rock stop, and then it starts sliding all over the place on them. So just bring the one that connects to a chair. That's pretty much foolproof, okay? The other thing I would definitely bring is not one, but 2 pencils with good erasers, okay? This is for taking notes in parts, and I say to bring 2 because I would much rather be that person who has an extra pencil for someone to borrow than that person who is asking around looking for a pencil because they need to make markings. Okay, so be the person with the extra pencil for someone else. And finally, the last thing, I'm just going to show you my cell phone because that's where I have my tuner, but you should bring a tuner with you. Okay, I'm going to talk about that in the next category a little bit also. But especially if you're not comfortable just tuning by ear, which a lot of people earlier on in their journey are not comfortable doing that, you don't want to be stuck without a tuner where you can kind of get yourself situated quietly and without any pressure on. Let's go to section number 2, and that's prep. In terms of what to do before the first rehearsal, the first thing I would do, try to find out all of the repertoire that you're going to be covering. That will be a lifesaver for you, because if you're not used to dealing with orchestral parts, the more familiar you are with what's coming at you, the better it's going to be. There's a website, imslp.org. It's probably the world's biggest collection of sheet music that's public domain. And so you can usually, if it's an orchestral piece like a symphony, you can download the cello part and take a look at it. I would also highly, highly recommend listening to the symphony, Spotify, YouTube, however you want to do it. Listen to the symphony or whatever piece you're playing. And if possible, if you feel comfortable enough, do it while following along in your orchestral part. But just having that much familiarity ahead of time will really help, because from my own experience, I kind of looked at the parts a little bit. I felt pretty comfortable, and then I hadn't really listened to the parts. And that first rehearsal, I remember we were playing the fugal movement from Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique, and I just heard all the other instruments. I got so overwhelmed and just kind of amazed by what I was hearing. I got completely lost, and I stayed lost throughout the entire rehearsal. Luckily, I was in the back just being lost, but it's not a fun feeling. So, okay, now, when we're talking about the actual rehearsal itself, I would plan to get there 30 minutes ahead of time, okay? Especially if you've never parked there before and you just want to have plenty of time. You don't want to feel rushed, so get there at least a half hour ahead of time. And then the final thing I would say, in terms of tuning, and I still do this to this day, I would take your tuner, and as I unpack off stage, that's when I will first tune, okay? So that when I walk on stage, I know that, unless something really weird happened, I have everything perfectly in tune already. And then when the orchestra takes an A, the oboe gives the A at 440 or whatever it is, that's when you can kind of check and just double check that nothing went weird. Tuning can be nerve-wracking, and it's one of those things that when people are watching you or when you feel pressure, it's harder and harder to tune quickly and efficiently because you just psych yourself out. You're like, I don't know, is that even flat or sharp? I just know it's off. You don't want to feel that way. So just tune off stage. I should also say it can be pretty loud too. So if you're not used to tuning while other people are tuning their instruments right next to you, that can be difficult as well. All right, number 3, let's talk about etiquette. The first thing is, if you're in a group, like the cello section, if you have a question, you ask your section leader, who's the first person on the outside. So there's usually 2 rows of players, and there's the inside row, which is closer to the middle of the orchestra, and the outside, which is what the audience, the row closer to the audience. The first person at the very front on the outside, that's the leader, okay? They play the solos when a solo happens in the music, but they are also the leader of the entire group. So don't just raise your hand and ask a conductor, especially if it's a cello-specific question. The first thing you should do is ask your leader. This is something that I made the mistake a couple times, and people were pretty cool about it, but it can ruffle feathers if you because you're just kind of like, they are sort of like your team captain, and you're just like, oh yeah, I don't care if you're a team captain, I'm just going to do my own thing. So it can kind of get on people's nerves if you do that, especially more than once. Okay, so let's talk about inside outside, what I just talked about. So there's 2 rows, and actually there's a little bit of kind of role playing that happens within that. Okay, so the inside players tend to be almost always the people who are going to do the page turning. Okay, so this will happen multiple times in a long symphony. You're playing, and there's no break coming, but a page needs to be turned. So all the inside players will reach, and what I would do, just so you know, don't just flip the page, okay? I would stop playing about at least a bar ahead of time, depending on how fast the music's going, and I get the page ready, and then I kind of look over at the person on the outside, my stand partner. We're sharing the stand, okay? So I look, and they'll be playing, and they'll kind of give a nod, and that means I've processed the notes at the end of the page, turn the page now, okay? Because if you just reach over and flip it, they're like, hey, I wasn't, and if you get real eager, you flip it 2 bars early. I've done that too. I've done everything wrong you could possibly do. So just, kind of check in with them. They'll give you a slight nod, and boom. It's really good etiquette with that. Goes a long way. Okay, another thing that the inside player does, and I'm going to put an asterisk here because it depends on the group, but a lot of times the inside player will be the one who does the markings, and this is like if they change bowings, or if the conductor says it's marked piano, but for this group we're going to go mezzo piano here or pianissimo. Often the inside player is the one who does the markings. That can change from group to group, so if you're sitting on the inside, be prepared to do that, but then you can kind of just feel it out when you get there and see how people are. Sometimes it's just like a free-for-all, and just people mark as is, or there's kind of, you'll know quickly if there's like an established thing, because conductor says something and then everyone on the inside like automatically reaches for a pencil to put the marking in. Okay, so just kind of follow the others around you. Okay, so I just talked about marking the part. Here's the warning: don't mark too much. So that's another little bit of etiquette. Because you have a stand partner, that means you're sharing a piece of music. And again, a thing I did is I took the music home, because sometimes often you can take the music home with you. And I went to town because I really wanted to do a good job. I put fingerings all over it. I put all these markings to myself, like notes and all this stuff. And I came back, and my stand partner was nice about it, but it was pretty clear that it was a kind of a distraction, that I had just put all of my own personal fingerings and notes, because that doesn't mean that he's going to use the same fingerings or she's going to use the same fingerings. So you want to mark kind of what's required, but don't just go crazy on it, okay? Because it is like a communal piece of music that you're sharing with someone else. So now a final little tip I would give: oftentimes there'll be a quick rehearsal right before a concert, or like a sound check kind of thing. Sometimes you'll see cellists or bass players put their instrument down kind of on stage and then just leave it on stage and walk off stage. I'm a real nervous person that way. I've seen so many accidents happen, because usually it's the stage looks big, but it's when you're where you have to walk is usually more cramped than you'd imagine. And then you've got a cello lying on its side, and there's an end pin that's sticking out, and all you need is one person walking down, and a friend asks them a question. They turn and they keep walking. They don't see your end pin, and then they kick it, and the cello falls over. And I've seen instruments kind of just get like a little nicked from that. I've seen slightly more catastrophic things where like the bridge popped off and there might have been a crack on the instrument. Especially for cellists, don't leave your instrument on stage. Just take it with you. Even a bow, some people leave their bow on the stand. You got your jacket touches the little frog, the button at the end of the bow or the tip, and that flies off. So don't do that either, okay? So all your equipment, just kind of have your hands on it at all times or have it in your case. Okay, final kind of category is called fake it till you make it. You're joining a group of people, and so the point here is to contribute to the group and do as little like disruptive playing as possible. So the number one thing that is audible, no matter how small a sound you make, if there's a silence written into the music and you play into that silence, silence is only silent if everybody isn't playing. So that's like a huge, I won't say mistake, and I won't say it never happens or like I've never done it, but it's just, that's the thing to watch out for the most. The other thing connected to that is that the right note at the wrong time is the wrong note. And what I mean by that is, let's say there's a passage and it's kind of moving quickly, and you can play all the notes at your tempo, but you can't quite play all the notes at the tempo of the orchestra. If you kind of buckle down, you're like, whatever, I just want to prove that to myself I can play this, and you play it, but you're just kind of behind everyone else. Now there's going to be this horrible discord between your speed and the notes you're playing and the rest of the group. So there are times where you want to sort of swallow your pride and leave stuff out if it's past sort of where you're at the moment. There is nothing wrong with that. That's a beautiful thing about playing in a community, is we're kind of all here for each other, and it's a cello section. You've got this whole group of cellos, we're all playing the same notes. So if something comes up and you don't feel prepared to play it, this isn't like a Rambo moment where you just like go for it. You just leave it out and follow the music and then jump back in. Man, have I like really got good at that, which because I was playing in an orchestra and I'd been playing for under a year. It was completely over my head. So I quickly, I was talking with my teacher about it, and we came up with a plan, and it was a great plan, which was I was just going to learn how to follow music beautifully while I'm not playing, and then when I can, I'm going to contribute, and then when it gets totally crazy, I just start following that music and kind of airbow, so that it doesn't look like I'm just like, okay, this is too hard. Okay, here's a quarter note. Great. Okay, that's too hard again. So you just sort of, like on TV when you see people pretending to play music in commercials, you just airbow, and then when it's something you can play, you just go ahead and play, okay? So fake it till you make it with the music is kind of like the golden rule, especially if you're jumping into an orchestra for the first time. However, I would take the exact opposite approach when you're talking about like people in the orchestra and all your social interactions. Okay, so fake it till you make it. I'm not saying walk in there and be like, yeah, I do this all the time. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. What's the rep? Okay, cool. Yeah, let's do it. No, I would be completely candid. That's what I always did. And most people are very sympathetic. And if anything, they're just going to be like, that is so cool that you started playing and you're here now. If you have any questions, just ask me. Like, it's wonderful to have you here. That's what I got most of the time, okay? So I would just be very candid. Even if you think you're faking well, like your stand partner knows what you're doing and what you're not doing, and people can kind of tell who's like a beast on the instrument, who's not. You're not going to fool anyone. There's no reason to try to fool anyone. just be really candid. Be like, this is my first time. I'm really excited. I'm a little nervous. And I think most community groups are going to be thrilled to have you and really excited to see that someone, in their adult years has had enough dedication to get themselves to where they can play in a group setting. So those are kind of my tips and suggestions for playing in your first ensemble. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. I'd really appreciate it. All right, see you next week.